Welcome once again to KDRTV, our viewers, especially the ones who live in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. Today we are having a discussion or a continuation of our debate for the mayoral elections, which is forthcoming. Let me say, we have started the week a few days from today. Definitely they'll have to correct me, but I believe it should be on Tuesday. So today we are still having the three gentlemen. Mr. Russell, no, sorry, not Mr. Russell. Today again, he has not managed to log in. But we are having Mr. Benjamin, we have got Mr. Boyd, and then we have Mr. Hollis. So I'm going to welcome them, or I'm going to usher them on the screen. Then we start the debate where we left it last time. So gentlemen, welcome again to KDRTV.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Because of time, we are going to start straight, and we are going to pick it from where we left last week. Now we are going to talk about police reforms and safety in the city of Brooklyn Park. So this question is going directly to Mr. Benjamin. How are you planning? How are you planning to ensure that the residents of Brooklyn Park are safe and there is a good coexistence between the residents and the police? Mr. Benjamin?
Thank you very much, Bernard. And to my Kenyan brothers and sisters, I say, Amani Iwe Yahweh, Nawe, on this Divine Mercy Sunday. With regard to the police incidents and community safety, I intend to implement a towards zero-death comprehensive plan or program, which will entail breaking down the tension that currently exists between some segment of our community and police by de-escalating over-policing in those areas and encouraging more participation of community action group, which I intend to establish at the precinct level, or what President Biden called neighborhood involvement. With that in place, we will try to normalize the relationship between police and the community and Brooklyn Park residents in general, thereby making it possible for the police to implement the youth academy program to get our children involved in police and be the police officers of the future, thereby making them live in the city that they serve, know the city they serve, and engage the community effectively. I will also encourage the enforcement of the mandated police body camera for all police stops to have a certain true incidents and what takes place. I will also include my police Brooklyn Park Higher Brooklyn Park initiative, which entails that preferential hiring will be given to all city staff, people that come from Brooklyn Park, to enable the people that make up the police department live in the city they serve, know the city and know the community, and be able to engage them effectively.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just 30 seconds, please.
Finally,
go ahead. Yeah.
Finally, as President Biden mentioned, the use of technology to try to address some of these issues that we have. I will, through private private and public-private partnership with the cities and other organizations and businesses in Brooklyn Park to install surveillance cameras in those areas and link it to the police department to prevent crime, be proactive about crime before it happens, and also treat every crime, starting from misdemeanor to, with a serious eye to determine the root causes of such problem before it gets to felony, which will involve killing, both in the police, of police and Brooklyn Park residents. Thank you.
Mr. Benjamin, before I request Mr. Boyd also to have a reaction on the same question. You are talking about police cameras to be linked to a system or to how do I call it? To a system whereby you can actually see how the police are dealing with residents. I believe this is something which is already in place. Is it something you want to right now put in place, or is this something already we know that is in the system, is in the works?
There is two things there. One is the police body cam. That is a mandate already in place. But as you may realize, I think last week in Virginia, a police officer shot an unarmed brother, and but didn't have his body camera on, and so there is no account of what happened. But later on, it was stipulated that the individual had a gun. Now, the second one is like a surveillance camera, which most of the businesses have right now, but is going to be coordinated, and include organizations that don't have it, and link it to the police. And the monitoring, this is where the private and public-private partnership comes in. The monitoring should be staged in such a way that it will be a proactive instrument for the police to prevent crime before it happens. And that was what President Biden was alluding to in his executive order.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Boyd, how are you going to ensure that we have a good coexistence between the residents of Brooklyn Park and the police? And what kind of reforms are you anticipating to bring in the city when elected as a mayor?
Thank you. As the next 13th mayor of Brooklyn Park, first of all, I want to say, Brother Benjamin, thank you for sharing my idea. I went to Detroit and picked up and reviewed the Green Light Project from the city of Detroit to bring to Brooklyn Park, which is a real-time camera on incidents happening straight to the police monitor cameras. Something that I'm implementing right now or talking about, discussing. We have it on the table right now with City Council with the police chief, and us talking about this same thing that I went personally and reviewed myself to bring it back to the city to use in our city, in our troubled neighborhoods, to make sure that we can keep an eye on some of the unwanted crime in our particular communities. Also to give us access to real-time footage of those that want to come and perpetrate crime in our city, unfortunately. Also, to proactively engage our community, I think that residents, we need to get back to basic community policing. And basic policing was when I was growing up, police used to live in a community, as we did with many of us here. And we knew officer so-and-so, and officer so-and-so knew us. So I think as an incentive to get police officers to come here, I'm proposing an incentive to attract officers to come here by giving them a $10,000 home loan to buy a property in our city. And for those police officers to come to our city under this $10,000 home loan, we'll give them a $10,000 home loan to purchase a property in our city. And each year that they remain in our city, we'll deduct $1,000 off of that loan that we just gave them until it's all exhausted, or unless they move out earlier, then they will owe us that money back. That way we will bring in new officers to our community. We'll be creating an incentive for officers to come to Brooklyn Park and want to come to Brooklyn Park. Also, I think it's very important for police officer community to actually volunteer in our community, to get to know our community, and our community to get to know them as well. I also think that the police should have an annual psychological evaluation check, just to make sure and to ensure they're still mentally sane to be a police officer. We don't want them having no troubles and or struggles serving our particular community and or to their families and or to themselves. So if it's caught and or detected at an early stage in their life, they have an opportunity to resign and do something differently, and or we can catch them before it turns into something that we don't want to turn into, like we're looking at the George Floyd situation. Next, I think police need to also be having a background check to make sure that they not have no link or ties with white supremacist group, hate groups that perpetuated that stuff on January the 6th up there at the Capitol. Many of them was police officers and Congress people and doctors and regular normal people that participated in those things. We need to make sure we do a background check on them to make sure that they're not engaging in or involved in any of those type of unwanted activities that can bring some type of challenges to our particular city. We need to make sure we monitor them on those type of things like that. We need to make sure they do a psychological evaluation check. We need to make sure they live in our particular community, and also just make sure they're part of the fabric that we're making and creating here in our community. And one little simple thing that I want to do is to get a puppy. That may sound so simple. To get a puppy for the police department. So as that puppy grows, so will our community, because all of our residents will be able to come take pictures with this puppy, to see the police puppy, to begin to engage our particular community together. So as that puppy grows, so will our community. They can say they took a picture when he was a little puppy, or as he got older, and he needs to be a beacon of light and a ray of hope in our community that we take around to our schools, as well as in our neighborhoods, so people can meet the new Brooklyn Park police dog, you know, a friendly dog for our particular community, to help us to build that bridge and gap through a puppy. So we need to just proactively do some things that's positive and engage in our community in a proactive way. So these are just some simple measures that I got in place that I'm doing as city council currently, and that I would do as the next mayor of Brooklyn Park.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd. So let's bring in Hollis before we get a reaction from Mr. Benjamin. Mr. Hollis, are you planning to ensure that the city of, the residents of Brooklyn, Brooklyn Park are safe and they're having a good relationship with the police? Go ahead, Mr. Hollis.
Yeah. So quickly to kind of address some of the other ideas, I think the idea of having businesses have all this monitoring, I think there's a cost associated with that, and it's not just on the city side, it's on the side of businesses. And so I think we have to take a look at that, because businesses are in the habit of making profit, right? Not necessarily monitoring or creating a nanny state within the city. Nevertheless, I think it's something I would take a look at, but I do think we need to make sure that it's cost effective and it's not onerous to our businesses. But as far as how I would actually address public safety, I would say, one of the things I've noticed is that, just a brief example, I remember my wife and I were walking down Brookdale Drive, and we were headed towards the Dairy Queen, and there was some black youth that were sitting on a bench. One of the black youth popped up real quickly. I don't know what he had in mind, but I looked at him, and whatever he was going to do or whatever he was thinking, I don't even think he was going to do anything bad. He just kind of checked himself, right? And then the police were driving by, and they said, "Sir, is he?" They got aggressive. Is he bothering you, right? And I looked at the kid. I said, "You could tell that the kid had nothing on his mind. But if I had been a different type of person and said he's bothering me, that kid would have had a problem. He would have had an issue." Right? And you could tell that police officer had no relationship whatsoever with that youth. It was basically the police officer was cruising by in his car, just kind of like they were not in a militarized zone, but right, like as if they were in a safe place, when really this is a neighborhood. So I think part of it is that the police have to get out of their cars and understand what's going on at a much more intimate level throughout the city. Some of that could be around something as simple as, what Boyd is saying with the puppy. Some of it could be volunteering, but much of it is just getting out on foot when weather allows and meeting the community, understanding the issues that people are dealing with. And to help with that, Brooklyn Park needs to continue, because they're doing some of this, but they need to continue to invest in mental health resources, social service resources. So if it is a mental health issue, the police know the community intimately enough that they can say, okay, this is a mental health issue. We need to get a resource over here. We need to de-escalate the situation versus escalating it and then having a bad outcome. Someone's name is in the system, right? And we can't take that back. right? So I think that's where a lot of it starts. The next thing is diversity, right? I think you got a city that's 56% people of color. The police department needs to reflect more of that, and it needs to reflect people who understand how different communities work, and they're very much interested in doing that. So I do think you need to incentivize the police to move a little bit differently. Some of that could be saying, hey, we're going to give you a loan to stay here, right? I think you don't necessarily attract the people you want if they're doing it just to get a loan, right? But I think you need to also say, how are policing the streets, and what incentivize? Is it tickets, or is it certain type of arrest? What are we incentivizing them at? Are we incentivizing them at to just respond, or are we incentivizing them to get ahead of things, right? And we need to start looking at changing those incentives, because that's how we're going to change how policing occurs. And then youth program. So we have seen what a lot of people like to say is, hey, we got a 30-year low in crime in Brooklyn Park. You do, but you don't have it in violent crime, right? In violent crime, the perpetrator, it can change their life, but even more so the victim, right? So we've got ahead of this in the past by investing heavily in youth programming, and Brooklyn Park needs to get back to that. So we need to start connecting our youth with not just sports and things of that nature, but we need to talk to you and say, how do we get you involved in apprenticeship, so some of you who are inclined can get involved with this? Those of you who want to go to college, how can we get you involved with that? Those of you who want to work with some of these Fortune 500s, how do we connect you? Because we've given them tax incentives, so they need to get back and get these youth involved. So I think it's kind of a getting out the car and getting more aware, getting more diversity, and getting more youth programming to kind of disrupt that, not to kind of, but to really disrupt that, school to prison pipeline. I think those are going to be the major things. And one other thing I want to say about psychological, I think it is excellent. Maybe there should be some type of yearly of test, right? But I believe there's some of that already. But I also think that the criteria for passing that test has allowed it doesn't necessarily allow for the outcomes that we want, right? So we have to say, what exactly is it we're testing for? What are we looking for so that these don't happen again, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we have to change, and you really have to change that incentivization structure. And then you also have to very much look at what are we doing in terms of criteria? How are we bringing people here? So I think you have to kind of look at all of those things together, and that's how you're going to change it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Okay, a reaction from Benjamin, 30 seconds, please. You are muted, Mr. Benjamin. Don't mute yourself. We'll be muting you from this end, please.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
I must correct Mr. Boyd that the camera project that I'm talking about, the green light project that Boyd referred to, has to deal, it's in Detroit, has to deal with gas stations. What I am proposing is beyond gas stations. It includes our churches, our places like Walmart, but at the same time, it's not just taking the surveillance camera. I have a picture. I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah, flash it towards the other end. Yeah, go ahead.
This way?
Yeah, the other way, the other way. Yeah, that way. That way. Yeah.
This is part of a public-private partnership that I dealt with that made technology review with MIT. Why do I share this? When I say taking the surveillance cameras, there are some stages, things that has to be built in behind the scene to make such an action proactive. Now, currently, I heard about giving police officers 10,000 loan to come and work in Brooklyn Park. While there are some police officers that live outside Brooklyn Park that would like to live in Brooklyn Park, all we need to do is to utilize my expanded 4D program to make houses truly affordable to these police officers to live in the city they serve, know the city they serve, and be able to engage them effectively. Now, President, my brother Hollis said that there is cost involved in the camera. Well, I don't know how many of you listened to President Biden's executive order. He also offered some grants for communities and cities like us to utilize technology, which is what we are talking about here, to address crime before they get to the part of shooting people. And also one thing, calling, when we go to address crime, one of the things I intend to implement as a mayor is this issue of calling, saying that we are fighting crime. Shying away from that, but rather say that we are mitigating crime. That way we tone down, when you say you are fighting, you get people going to fight, either the police get killed or a citizen gets killed. And
we'll come to that. We'll come to
police.
that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. First of all, let me give Mr. Hollis 30 seconds or so to react. Then we'll get a reaction from Boyd. Go ahead, Mr. Hollis.
Yeah, so just real quickly, I'm not saying I'm against the program. I'm not saying, I just think you need to take at the cost, look at the cost, long-term costs. So one of the things I go to the Capitol is they get funding for businesses, for agriculture, for all these things. You get grants from the federal government. They come down and then people say, well, you've got all this money to spend. One thing the state government has to do and the city has to do is say, okay, yes, we've got these grants. This will cover 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Then you have to say, what are the costs after that, right? So I think if it makes sense, great, but you can't just look at those short-term costs. You got to look at the long-term costs of maintaining that system. And I think we don't always do a good job of that when we look at funds from the federal level. So I think it's something that has to be looked into. But just from my understanding and what I've seen, at the state level, it doesn't always work out so well as the federal government just says, we give you this grant and now you can have this program for the next 30 years. I think you have to look at how you're going to finance that. And does it make sense? And are there some other cost-effective ways to bring down crime and deal with this versus maybe a little bit more spendy program?
Thank you very much. Mr. Boyd, what's your reaction?
Well, first of all, people go in business to make money. So when you make money, you're there to protect your investment as well. So things that it costs to minimize any type of break-ins on your business is up to you too as well, to make sure you exhaust some costs in trying to protect your own business. Also, let me say this again, Brother Benjamin still don't have all of the information to my particular project. He just got bits and pieces. This green light project is on McDonald's, it's on apartment buildings, it's on all these businesses in Detroit. It's not just gas stations. So I'm the one that's bringing us to the table. So he's grabbing bits and pieces to make it, elevate his, whatever his approach is, but I'm the one that brought this here to the table. So it's with apartment buildings, it's with McDonald's, it's with all the businesses within the community that's proactively working together to minimize and reduce crime, particularly in the city of Detroit, which they drop crime tremendously in the city of Detroit as a direct result of these cameras that's being posted all over these particular buildings to actually monitor unwanted activity or crime within those areas to help reduce crime. So of course there's dollars, there's money that's out there available, but we all so have to invest in. And then here's a bigger question. How much do you pay to be safe? How much does it cost to feel safe?
We let the businesses determine that.
We let the business determine that?
For their own business, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Boyd, we don't want, go ahead.
We're talking about
I'm not into a state, I'm a capitalist, man. I'm not into state sanctioned solutions or centralized governance or anything like that. I think, I'm not saying that the green, that the project that you bring to the table is completely wrong. I do think that there needs to be a lot of input from local businesses, from, of course, city council, from the community, right? So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm very wary of getting overly centralized government, because then you move away from, kind of what business does in America to something a little bit more socialized or centralized, which as a business person, that makes me uncomfortable. I think business has a moral duty, right? But I also think that businesses generally know what works best for them. So I think it's got to be much more collaborative understanding of what we should do. That's all. I'm willing to consider all options.
Yeah, let Boyd finish. Let Boyd finish his statement, please.
Well, if businesses are in the business of making money and in business, this should be another line item that they use as a form of business to protect their business. So whether or not you're a capitalist or whatever you want to call yourself, the thing of it is how much does it cost to be safe and to protect your business for any unwanted crime? When people visit your business, they own your property. So shouldn't those people feel and want to be safe on there? Shouldn't you want to actually protect your businesses. The same thing happened years ago with Blondie's. There was a killing at Blondie's. And I was part of that I was part of that project about Blondie's when Romeo got killed up there. So now the business owner had cameras. His cameras was all situated on his cash registers. They was not located nowhere on his constituents who was patronizing his business. So when we went in to pull camera footage from this particular shooting, none of the cameras was actually on watching his patrons who spending money in his business. He didn't care. He was worried about his bottom line, his cash register, what he was going to make in profit, not protecting his particular people that's helping him to make his money. So I'm just trying to say these are some common sense solutions that, of course, have to have some dialogue with the community to make sure and ensure that it's feasible for everybody. I'm not just trying to put that on business. That's not what I'm saying. But it's a shared cause, a shared conversation as well, that I'm not trying to impose that to say this is how it's going to be. It has to be an amicable decision made amongst the partnerships within the community that want to have a better, a safer, protected, and respected community, and also for their business. Their business been breaking in all the time. But if you don't have camera footages, if you don't have those things to safeguard your business, that's on you. If you don't have an alarm, if you don't have a camera, if you don't have any of those things, everything that you got in there is on you. That's just really, to me, that's not business.
Thank you, Mr. Hollis. Mr. Hollis, before you speak, please, let Mr. Benjamin, please. Mr. Benjamin, what's your reaction, please? Go ahead.
Well, I wish my brother Boyd would also mention me as part of the Blondie experience, because I remember back in the days, you know, how we worked together with regard to Blondie. But let me get back to the issue in question. Hollis talked about the capitalism. Now, you see, that is where the experience and background in public-private, private-private, and public-private partnership comes in. When I talk about the cameras, there are so many layers behind surveillance that we have to work through the public-private. There is some issues with recording people, you know, that needs to be worked out. But the agreement has to be between the organizations, the businesses, the police, and the community. Okay? So it's going to be a public. But by public, it means getting our community action groups involved, businesses involved, and putting a comprehensive plan. If this sounds familiar with my expanded emergency response team, it is correct, because that is where you build a partnership. The cost involved has to be shared. There's going to be benefits from both sides, and each side has to contribute towards that. And yet we still have a grant that is already available, you know, to help us get that in place. So the issue of saying that, you know, capitalism, I'm a businessman also, I own a business. Okay, so that does not come to play if you have a true public-private and private partnership. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hollis, before we move on to another topic.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think you know, I think when Boyd came back and said, hey, if it's amicable, right? I think the key word for me is amicable. When all of the key partners come to the table, I think when it was more so, when I hear a tone of businesses should do this, or this makes the most sense for businesses, when your business is your sole means of income, you will have to make sometimes difficult decisions in terms of what type of security you use, and I remember Blondie's, right? And Blondie's was an experience back in the day. So I think he made some decisions that were not in his best interest. And it blew up in their face, right? So I think sometimes you make bad decisions, your business doesn't get to last as long as it should, right? And I think that is what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I don't think that should be mandated. I don't believe that everything should be overly centralized. But if you're saying an amicable solution where parties come together, that makes much more sense to me. And I think that serves the business, that serves the purposes, not only the community, but it also serves the purposes of businesses. But businesses, they're watching costs. And so when you have someone who plays at business, which is a lot of people do who say they own businesses, right? Versus someone who they don't eat if their business doesn't make money. They don't necessarily understand that those people have to make very difficult decisions. And even some of the largest businesses you've seen in the beginning, they made some tough decisions that your average consumer wouldn't necessarily understand. But they had to do that to get to the next level where they could provide 10,000 jobs, right? So I'm against mandating, but I do think if it's amicable, it's something that folks work out. That makes a lot more sense than telling people, well, this makes the most sense for you, or this is what you should do, or this is what I expect out of you. I don't think that's the way it works with business. And I don't think that's the way it should work with business, nor should it work that way with the community as well. I'm much more in terms of let's work this out in a way that everyone buys in. And I think when people buy in, then you get solutions that work long term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Now let's move ahead and try to de-escalate the situation, especially when a policeman wants to arrest a resident. So you guys, as the mayor, what do you think should actually be done in that particular few seconds before things actually get worse? What's your suggestion? Let's start from Mr. Boyd.
Well, first of all, the situation is contentious, threatening, or felt to be threatening, because there's an unfamiliarity with that person in that vehicle and that particular officer. It goes back to the conversation we was just having about how we engage our community. So just take, if this officer knew Boyd by being in the community with Boyd, if he pulled me over on the street, then he would know that that's not a threatening situation, or he know that I'm a familiar person within the city that he's servicing. So they call the stop shouldn't be as threatening because he has some familiarity with me, and I shouldn't have to feel scared because now I have some familiarity with that officer. This goes back to the very basic principles of policing: to serve and protect. The same thing that they took off police cars. If you watch police cars, they took those keywords off, to serve and protect. And it leaves a badge on there that says law enforcement. So that's the mindset over the years that police have gotten into, enforcing the law, as opposed to serving and protecting. But we hire them to serve and protect as well as to be law enforcement officers. And then you know that the language have changed over the many years, have evolved from police officers to them being called law enforcement officers. So they're putting a psychological barrier in our head to make sure that we are aware that their job is to enforce the law. And this is the same barrier in putting in their head that they are law enforcement officers, as opposed to police officers to serve and protect. So when you eliminate serve and protect off police cars, they're eliminating to serve and protect, which is a paramount of their job within our particular community. So we have to go back to basic, fundamental, common sense solutions to common issues probably nobody really addressing, that I keep trying to pinpoint to give us back to community policing. Again, that stop wouldn't be as a contentious stop or threatening stop for either party, because that police is now engaged in that community. And now, as mayor of Brooklyn Park, when you see those uniforms, the new ease of policing and respecting them will be the new way we do business in the city of Brooklyn Park. Safer, protected, and respected. SPR is a blueprint that I put together for a safer, protected, and more respected police department and community.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benjamin, what's your take on that?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, just similar to what Boyd said, we have an over-policing in certain areas that has created tension that need to be de-escalated, by using more community policing or neighborhood or action group. They are the same thing, to de-escalate that tension. Now, also, when we go to address a crime, if we're not saying that we are fighting crime, that we are meditating crime, we are de-escalating that incident. Now, I talked about my High Brooklyn Park initiative, which will make it possible to hire people that live in the community they serve, come from the community they serve, and engage them more effectively. But let's not lose the fact that as our community feel threatened by the police also feel threatened by our community. Because there are crimes on our brothers and sisters that we perpetrate on ourselves that we need to address as part of my towards zero crime and police incident. And what does that entail? Trying to get to the root causes of misdemeanor crimes. Okay? Finding out why it happens. You have frustrated parents struggling with their rents, their mortgages, and food on their table. Their children going, astray, joining criminals because they didn't have enough time, or have an after-school program to address it. These are things that we need to put in place with all the de-escalation. And if you have a police force that knows that he is going to mitigate crime, not fight crime, he will approach an incident in a more cordial way. And that's going to be part of the police training, okay, to make sure that de-escalation is across the board. So
Thank
that,
you.
Yeah, when that
Thank you.
happens,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, please finalize it in 10 seconds, please. You've taken more than your allotted time. Go ahead.
The point I'm saying is that, the package, everything has to be put together, to make it possible for a police officer to approach a crime scene, mitigating it, not fighting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vin. Mr. Harris, your take, please, on the same issue.
So one of the things I've learned, I remember from my brief time in law school, I just chose not to be a lawyer. I went for a year, but I'll say this. There's been research that shows that when it comes to doing drugs or other things, African-American youth and children don't do any more than any other community. They just tend to be over-policed. So it's not something that we can necessarily change the behavior of our people to act better than other folks. We're normal, and we just tend to be over-policed. And our children tend to pay a higher price for doing the same things that other people do. You look confused on this, Ben, but the reality is there's a number of African-American officers that will tell you our children are no more criminals than anybody else. And so they should not be over-criminalized more than anyone else. Let me finish my point.
He's basically, he's applauding what you're saying, yeah? He's applauding you.
Okay, that's fine. But what you said could have been misconstrued when you said, well, some of these things are on our part. Mm-hmm. Not if you're comparing us to other communities, right? Yes. So we shouldn't be treated any differently than anybody else. Mm-hmm. There shouldn't be a higher or lower standard. That's what your language would mean. But we can agree to disagree on that. Mm-hmm. What I'll say is this: is that it's difficult, whether you call it peace officers, whether you call it community policing, anything of that nature. Really what you're looking at is institutional change, and it's very difficult to imagine what a police department should look like that actually works for all communities involved, right? But I do believe, to Boyd's point about the police officers not always being familiar with the community or being able to recognize a real threat, right? I think that is an issue, and that is something that we've discussed earlier. I think when you talk about diversity, one of the issues is that when you get in that tense 5-second period or 3-second period, many times somebody's preconceived notions of who somebody is, that decision is already made as to how they're going to react. And if you have somebody who is from the community, who reflects the community, who's consistently having conversations with other police officers to tell them how to deal with these issues, then maybe that decision is made differently long before that 3 seconds happens in that tension, right? So I think diversity is a huge part of diversifying the police force is a huge part of solving this issue. I think incentivizing is an issue, right? We need to incentivize people to say, hey, it's not just about, whatever they have in place now, writing tickets or policing as we know it, right? What are some ways we can incentivize maybe people to de-escalate situations? How do we maybe reward them for doing that? That's not in place now, right? And then I'll also say this, in terms of those psychological reviews, I think that is important because if you're talking about a situation that can escalate in the space of 3 seconds, if someone isn't mentally healthy at that moment, you can have a disaster on your hands. So I think we need to lean in that. And then last point, I'll say this is, I don't necessarily know all the answers to that 3 seconds. I'm not out there. I've got a cousin who's in law enforcement as well. And having conversations with him, when you're on the ground, sometimes you don't necessarily know that decision, and then your training kicks in, right? So I think part of it is whoever is that mayor, right? Hopefully it's me, from my perspective, sitting down with city council, sitting down with law enforcement, sitting down with Sheriff Dave Hutchinson, right, who oversees Hennepin County sheriffs, and saying, what are some of the best practices here that we can put in place to change this? Because we don't have all the answers, and we need to reimagine something different, and we need to do that as partners. So I think that's how you get ahead of this thing, to change that 3 to 5 second window where things go wrong.
Thank you very much. Let me give Mr. Boyd 30 seconds reaction. Mr. Boyd, go ahead.
I want to say this. We've been doing this. How long police been around for a long time? An awful long time.
Thank you.
So if they've been along for a long time, everybody going through the academy on a regular basis, they going through training, and we graduating them to become police officers. I don't know how much more training you're going to give them, because whatever training you allowed them to have, you provided it and they graduated. And now you gave them a badge and a gun to be police officers. So now if you say they need more training, then maybe your program need to be looked at even closer, because you're not providing them with adequate training enough for them to go on the street to be police officers. Also, if there was a cure, just think of this. I stood up when they tried to open up the second police station that's on Brooklyn Boulevard. And I stepped up against this police station because it's only 60 seconds from the main police station. I don't know what difference that would have done. I spent $1 million+ to open up a second police station, and it's one just a minute away. Yet I propose to open up a police station on the Boone area, 252 area, keep the one in the where it is right now, and also one in Exerces. That way, if we have 4 different police stations strategically placed around our city, the ERT time would be reduced tremendously, because those officers are out of those particular stations that can get to you quicker. A police officer that's traveling from 85th over to Boone may take them 3 to 4 minutes to travel there. But if we had a station on Boone area, it would take them 1 to 2 minutes to get to the needs of that particular situation. If it was me in need of an officer's assistant, I would prefer that you take 1 to 2 minutes to get to me and 5 to 6 minutes to get to me. So we need to make sure we strategically place locations around our community where people can come. Now just imagine somebody over by Boone has to come all the way over to 85th to file a police report and all those type of things. So they're traveling all out of their neighborhoods to come file a report at a police station. That if it was one in close proximity to where they live in, all they had to do is go right down the street. And those police stations that's in those communities will become familiar again with those residents in that particular area. Now, lastly, I'm gonna close with this. When I spoke before council regarding this second police station, they sold this project to the community, that this building will deter crime. Now just stop and think about this. If any building in America would deter crime, wouldn't every city have it? Would every city have it, a building that deters crime? So that was a fabrication on selling that to the people, and the people bought it, which is unfortunate. But I stood up against that to present those 4 different strategically placed police stations, centrally located, strategically located about our city, to make sure we got a broader presence around our city to service and or meet the needs of our particular community, and by reducing emergency response time by any calls whatsoever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd.
One last thing, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Boyd.
And the last thing I'm gonna say is this: there's no such thing as zero crime. There's no such thing as zero crime. I don't care how you can think it or want to assume it. You can also want to assume it, but there's no such thing as zero crime, because you can't predict what other people is going to do. That's not left up to a police officer or any justice system whatsoever. That's up to that person that's perpetuating that particular crime. There's no such thing as zero crime, or how you going to get to zero crime. That may be something that you want to do, and we all want zero crime. That's not going to happen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benjamin, 30 seconds reaction before we move to the next topic, please.
The bottom line is that the 3 seconds that you mentioned can be achieved through community policing at the precinct level. We don't need more policing. We don't need more building. We need to de-escalate the policing to reduce the tension in areas that are over-policed. Now, with regard to the zero crime that I'm talking about, if you think zero, you put measures in place. Look at misdemeanor crimes with serious eyes to determine the root causes. Try to address it before it gets into felony. Okay? You may not get to zero, but you are working towards, he said, towards, not zero, towards zero crime and police incident. That means with that frame mind, we come up with ideas with the community, not just sitting with the city council and the police. That's been the issue in the past. But with the community involved, through community action groups at the precinct level, or community policing, like President Biden mentioned, to address such issues. So, he's saying that tomorrow you get zero. But as you work and come up with ideas to get to zero, okay, you could get from 50 to 20%. That's an achievement because your eye is to eliminating it entirely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin. You guys, you are pretty smart. Your ideas are pretty nice. And I hope that even our policemen or the police department will grab some of your ideas in order to improve public safety systems in the city of Brooklyn Park. So don't feel offended. I mean, whatever you are pushing forward is valid. But another question I really want you gentlemen to come forward with or advise the community on what to do. Are we part of the problem or we are part of the solution, especially from our home's perspective? Any reaction, Mr. Hollis, please?
What do you mean? Are we part of the problem or solution? Are our communities or?
Yes. Is the community to blame or is the police to blame? Are there issues which makes the police actually arrest our youths more or the resident of Brooklyn Park more? I mean, is this problem can this problem be de-escalated at home, or this something actually which can be, I mean, is always actually blown on the scene? Are we part of the problem? Do we train our youth? Do we train our people on how to deal with the police or on fighting crime? Go ahead, Mr. Hollis.
I think that Brooklyn Park, given the roots of Brooklyn Park, and I'm talking about going back a ways, right?
Yes.
You're just going to deal with certain patterns of crime, right? And so I don't necessarily blame whole communities and say, well, you need to crack down, you need to raise your children better, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's much more complex than that. And if you're really concerned about driving crime down, right, you're going to look at many of the socioeconomic factors that underlie that. That doesn't mean that you then turn around and say, well, it's all society's fault, right? I think it's much more complex than that. I think there's socioeconomic issues that need to be addressed, which is one of the reasons I'm running. I think if you can give people certain opportunities to get their children in a school to college or school to union or school to success pipeline, right, you bypass many of them interacting with the criminal justice system. Nevertheless, the stakes for all of this are extremely high. So when you're talking about the police department, I think many times they feel under attack. And I think what the community is simply saying is that as an officer, you're in an honored position. So if you react a certain way, my son's life is in your hands, right? And so we want you to get this right? So if I make a widget for a TV wrong, the TV just doesn't work. But when a police officer sometimes goes a little too far, then that person's life is changed. The community is changed. Someone is missing from the community. The community feels under attack. The police department deals with the blowback from that as well, right? So I don't think it's so simple as saying, well, one person or the other. I think what most everyone up here is saying is there's a lot of room for improvement for interactions between the police and the community. I'll be honest with you. The community, whether it's in Plymouth, Minnesota, or Edina, Minnesota, and trust me, I grew up in Plymouth for a number of years. There's crime out there. They just handle it very differently, right? Plymouth, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Detroit, Chicago, all these other different places, right? The community isn't going to change right away because they're dealing with life and whatever socioeconomic issues they're dealing with. The police department can change much quicker than the community can change to address many of these issues. The communities are trying. If you look at a community that's under duress and they are having a number of interactions with the police, they're not saying, "Hey, we're asking for this. Hey, we're falling down on the job here. We're just lazy. We don't want to get it done." That's not the issue at all. So while the community grapples with whatever issues they're grappling with across the country, by the way, right? People are saying to the police, but we know when you're dealing with a community of, let's just take Chicago, millions of people, and you've got a police force that's, hundreds of thousands or whatever, right? They say, or 100,000, whatever number is, right? They say, you're smaller than the community as a whole. You can change, you can pivot, you can get training better to do these things faster than the community can change to interact with you. And so I think that's where the focus needs to be. And that's why I say reimagine the institution. When I hear boys say, hey, police have been around a long time. You had these issues a long time, right? I completely agree. I also think that the way we look at that institution, what expectations we have are completely off base, right? And so I think we have to change that and not look at the community and say, I don't know if Boyd is shaking his head because he agrees with me or not. I'm not used to him agreeing with me, but I'll say this. But I'll say this. I think that's where my heart is saying is that I will do what I can as mayor to create situations where the community is thriving and prosperous, right? And we don't have some of these issues. But in the meantime, police, I need you to understand the environment in which you are operating and some of the issues people are dealing with. And let's do the best that we can to give Brooklyn Park the police department that it deserves. And that's not throwing the police under the bus. That's just saying you are in an honored, important position. And we expect much more from you than we do the general population because of the honored position that you have been put in.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benjamin, before we go to Mr. Boyd, your reaction, please. 30 seconds, because of time, please. Benjamin?
Well, first of all, my brother Bernard,
yes.
We're not fighting crime. We are mitigating crime.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
It takes one soul.
Yeah.
Now, with regard to the issue being laid on the community, and I talked about the after-school program. Okay, I talked about looking at crime and the root causes of crime. Okay, now the root causes of crime gets at some of the systematic racism some of our people face, which kind of goes back years. Now, why is this important in the discussion? Well, that is the reason why it is really important to have the community and the police working together in addressing these issues. Because, let's face it, when I said that our people kill our people too, that is a crime. And there is crime, that we commit against each other. And that there are some root causes to that too. So when we are looking at crime, I'm not talking about crime between police and resident, but crime on resident against resident. Mm-hmm. So when we are looking at crime, we have to look at the whole thing, and it's going to be involving our churches. I was at Ebenezer Community Church today, and I told them that the after-school program, is something as their next mayor, I will tap into them, being the community church and other churches, to form that after-school program that will help our children, bring them with love of God and love of one another, being a good Samaritan of each other, start teaching them and start at the same time working with the police to normalize situation. With every hands on board, we can address the problem.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boyd, your reaction, please.
Well, I'm going to say a couple of things, and I'm going to take it from a different perspective.
Go ahead.
Just as people blame raising your kids improperly, just think and go with me for this. If this police officer, who happened to be white, was raised up in a racist family all of his life or her life, that same racism that's been perpetuated over the many, many years, and now you gave them a badge and gun. So now they take that same hate, that same hate that they had for people, and you give them a badge and a gun. So are they equally at fault too? By growing up the way that they grew up in their household, you want to blame people of color for growing up and say their mom and dad's not doing this, that, or the other. But did those mom and dad do what they supposed to when they raised those police officers to be racist? And they now got a badge and a uniform and a gun to perpetuate the same stuff that they was brought up on from their family? Let's look at it from a different perspective. You can't take somebody that's been growing up for 20 years, 30 years, and been a racist for 30 years and get them to think that they undo it overnight, or just because you got a badge and a gun. So let's make sure that we keep the conversation intact the way that it should be. And police are just as accountable as your community that people speak about all the time, the mothers and fathers who's not or fatherless families who not raising these kids out here. So what about the families who had a mother and father, and again that they was racist and perpetuated that same hate in those particular kids? If we're gonna have a real discussion, let's talk about the real things that's going on. They're at fault and to blame too. But then you give them a uniform, so they pull over a situation, they get a target of a colored person, so now this heightens, they're fueling them up with energy because they've been waiting all this time. I was in a meeting in the community with some police officers in Brooklyn Park. One of the questions was, why did you become a police officer? Sadly, to my ears, two of the police officers say they became police officers getting gunfights and chase people up and down the streets and getting high-speed chases. And what kind of police is that? That's cowboy. When 2% of police officers' job is to get in gunfights, if that. But the 97% of a police officer's job is community engagement. So 97% of their job they're not doing. They're only doing 2 to 1% of their job that they're doing. And that's chasing people down the street and or hopefully not getting into gunfights, but sure, that's just reality. They get into some situations like that. But that's only less than 3% of a police officer's job that those things happen. Some police officers that people don't understand is that some of them have never pulled their weapon out of their holster in 5, 10, or 15 years because the situation has never warranted. So let's talk about those situations as well. That all the situations they've been involved in, they never thought that situation warranted them to pull their weapon, to unholster their weapon. So we're missing that point too. And that's a critical point because those police officers with that mindset that chose not to unholster their weapon, that was faced with challenging situations, they thought that probably unholstering that weapon would have escalated that situation and or wasn't warranted or needed. And we have to applaud them as well. But we need to make sure we look at the whole thing in its totality. About after school, across the nation, between 3 to 6 p.m. every day of the week is the highest of crime between you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd. Because of time, I'll be giving you each, because of time, we've got like 1 minute, but I'll add you like 4 minutes so that at least 6 minutes so that each of you can get a few minutes to do a closing remark. And while you are doing the closing remark, why do you think the people of Brooklyn Park should elect you as their next mayor? So when you're doing your closing remark, please join that one. Put it together. Thank you. Let's start from the left. Mr. Hollis, please. Even from the right, go ahead.
So, before I jump into that, what I'll say is this is, this has actually been a pretty good discussion. And, should I get the job of being mayor, that's a humbling position. And here's why. There's been things that Mr. Morrison said, that Ben has said that I agree with. Points that I didn't bring up. And I think the ability to listen and learn from what other people are saying, incorporate that into a better decision, is really what a city of our size and our complexity needs. Now, as far as why I should be mayor, I pointed to my experience as a business person, my relationships with elected officials, and being able to bring home resources to Brooklyn Park, my ability to manage, strategize. But I really think it's that ability to collaborate and to pull together coalitions, and the humbleness to be able to hear solutions from other folks and build a coalition on those solutions so that we get to the best product, the best outcome, the best service that we need for our community. I haven't seen that with Brooklyn Park, and I haven't seen anyone really do their best to unify all of our communities with some really good solutions. So I think that's what qualifies me the most. I will always say this: I am Democrat endorsed, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to listen to somebody who's conservative or who's a Republican or who's independent, because at the end of the day, I want to hear the solution, the best solution. I want to bring together a coalition that works, and then I want to help build a city that works for everyone that lives in our city and that provides opportunities to everyone. So I want to thank Bernard. Thank you for having this, for having us on. I want to thank folks for listening, and this is a great event. I thought this was going to be a little bit more contentious, but this was a great discussion, and I learned a ton. Ben, you're shaking your head again. You say,
I'm saying, I'm saying.
The other Ben.
Okay,
the
go
other
ahead.
Ben. I was like, you're gonna start Ben, but no. I think it was. it was a good discussion, and I learned a lot from folks. I hope other folks learned from me. And last thing, I will say this: if I don't get in, each one of the gentlemen on here who thought it was important enough to show up, I will be reaching out to you. And if I don't win, I'll be reaching out to say, hey, how can I support? How can I help? I'll have to eat some crow because I lost, but I still want our city to succeed, and I think I want to help whoever is in that position make this a city that works for everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin. You are 2 minutes, please.
So yes, and my brother always, my shaking my head means agreeing with you. First of all, thank the audience, and my brother Bernard, and my brother Boyd, and Hollis for participating in this discussion. You see, everything we talked about today is centered on love. The policeman that didn't pull their trigger in that 3 minutes or 3 seconds situation is filled with love in his heart. And we must not only talk about love, but live it. Love of God and love of one another, being a good Samaritan to each other. That is where it starts. And every policy, as your next mayor, would be the center of every policy that I put in place up to the city council and the city staff to embrace. Be it the water supply, be it property tax reduction, affordable housing, and police incidents. We've all had ideas from different candidates here. And in the last discussion, I gave a thumbs up to my brother Hollis for a great idea he had, and I've given thumbs up to my brother Boyd for an idea he had too. You see, but we have to match this with love, and I have been talking about that, and I hope my brother Boyd and my brother Hollis will join me in this, because everything we do without love of God, we are not getting anywhere. And that is what I intend to put together, to put in place first, with regard to issues that pertain our city, with the community, to make it happen. And I hope and wish each and every one of you, Boyd and Hollis, the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Boyd, your closing remark and why you need to be, okay, your closing shot, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to also thank you for part 2 of this particular conversation. And again, I too agree and echo all of my, my colleagues that this was a good discussion. And it's a discussion that the people need to hear, coming from that next mayor of Brooklyn Park, to make sure that they hear some of the ideas, solutions to combating the problems that we're facing in our particular community. And what I want to say to everybody that's watching and listening, you had 3 candidates that appeared here today, and they have their own perspective about how they believe that they can get to the best answer to solving the problems through the lens of their eyes. And you can't fault nobody for that, because that's their particular ideal and or their particular reasoning. However, I'm applauding each and everybody, because through this conversation, we learned how to listen. And we piggybacked on either of those conversations. We agreed with some of their conversations, and we shook our head, but it's okay to disagree. But it's also okay to support one another when they're right as well. You know, I just want to know that being the next mayor of Brooklyn Park, I'll become the most visible face, the most careful listener, the most credible voice, and a direct gateway to our state legislature for our first in line mosaic resources to make us a more vibrant, economically sound, sustaining city that's prideful and proud to call home in Brooklyn Park. I can't do this without you. I'm a U.S. Navy honorably discharged veteran, trained and prepared for moments of civil unrest, controversies, and challenges. And as we know, that's when the bold, brave, and courageous step up to defend our country. And I'm stepping up now to serve you, your family, in this city, to broaden my reach, to begin to have the discussions that we need to have, that we are not having, that we need to have to unite our community and give us a pathway forward together as one united Brooklyn Park. Something that I just can't ready to do by myself, but I'm respectful but directly ask for you guys' vote and support on April the 13th as the 13th mayor of the only Purple Heart awarded city in Hennepin County. And what better way to honor and bestow a veteran that's been tried, tested, and proven to honor that seat in Brooklyn Park and the only Purple Heart awarded city in Hennepin County. I want to thank you all for tuning in, listening, watching, hearing the three different diverse perspectives from 3 different men here that's all vying to be the next mayor of this particular community in this city of Brooklyn Park. I just want you to know that we're here for you, and we all have an idea of how we see best managing this particular city through the lens of our eyes. But we also are receptive to how others can look at us, how we're willing to extend our hand to embrace one another as well. That's what it takes, somebody that's willing to listen. Something, again, that I just can't do by myself. Respectfully ask for you guys' vote and support. My life learned lessons and years of experience brings me to this point today. So thank you again for all that you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. We've enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's now leave it to the voters to make a decision. But I believe and trust that the best candidate will definitely win. And let's, as you have all suggested, let's not just stop it here. Let's continue this discussion. Let's continue with this deliberation so that we can improve our community. And for that reason, we have now closed, or we are ending the debate. And may God bless you all. Thank you.